You are listening to the Two and Out CFL podcast, a proud member of the Canadian Football Podcast Network.
I'm Travis Currah with Sheldon Jones. Hey, how'd you like doing the show with Mr. Joe Balaneski while I was legitimately having fun with the Bears in Banff National Park?
It was okay once I finally started doing it. It was pretty nerve-wracking, but
hey, good job, man. I love it.
There you go.
Now, I got to tell this story from Banff. It's late Canada Day, and we pull over in a pullout down a side road, and we look in the ditch, and there are 8 raw burger patties sitting in a box, like a President's Choice burger, box of burgers. And we get out and pick up the burgers, put them in a garbage bag, and then, I'm not kidding you, this may sound crazy, but we hear branches breaking. We look up, and 20 yards away, a black bear is heading towards us. So probably investigating the smell of what he had picked up in the ditch. So rushed, got into the car, and I'm sorry, Mr. Bear, that we robbed you of some free burgers, but I'm also thankful that we robbed that bear of those free burgers. But what are people doing? I don't care where you are, you know? Like, I wouldn't want you to see that discarded in the grocery store parking lot, never mind in a national park. So that felt very sort of intentional to me. I'm glad we were there to catch it, but it makes you wonder how many other times this goes on without somebody there finding out what's happening. But yeah, it was a fun weekend in Banff. We didn't get back until 2 a.m, so I'm glad you did the show, Sheldon. Thank you very much, my man.
Yeah, people suck. Like, just like when you know that bears are there and you know that they try to get into garbage and it can be hard, like, just put it in the place where it's supposed to go.
Like, what do you even
laziness.
say? What do you even say? Like, the common sense is just gone. Like, that's the only thing. It was so frustrating. I was so rattled to find it. But hey, we'll pick up after you, I guess, if we have to, even though I'm not your mom, all right? We had some great news in the CFL this week. You and I are both fans of Shawn Oakman, and it just feels like, hey, maybe the Edmonton Elks are going to take any sort of player that leaves Toronto, because Shawn Oakman has signed with the Elks during this bye week. I see no reason why he won't be on the field next week as the Elks getting set to play the Ottawa REDBLACKS. He was probably available a little bit longer than I thought he would be, but the big man is going to be in Edmonton in the Jason Shivers / Chris Jones defense. Hey, I'll be at the game next Sunday. Got those season tickets in Edmonton, so I'm happy that I'll be able to see him play a few times this year.
Yeah, I think when it first was announced that he was released, I think there was 2 teams that I thought that would have, like, I would actually go after him, and that was the Riders and the Elks. So I'm pretty excited for Elks fans because, like you said, we're both fans, and he's massive. And when you're an 0-4 team, you need to make improvements, and adding a player of his caliber is going to be nothing but great for them.
A lot of talk on Wednesday, Sheldon, is to do with the NHL schedule and Grey Cup Sunday. Quickly, I got to bring it up here. The Vancouver Canucks have a 5 o'clock puck drop in Vancouver the day of the Grey Cup. And the Grey Cup festivities are starting at 3 o'clock, so there is some significant overlap between the two. Now, this is weird. Now, the Canucks play the night before against the Blackhawks, so they're not going to move the game earlier. But I think there's a good chance this game's going to be moved later. Fans will have the opportunity, especially local fans in Vancouver, to go to both games here, because the Jets and the NHL moved it for the Western Final in Winnipeg, especially if the Lions are in this game, which, who knows? Maybe they are in pretty good shape to be in that game. I think they'll move puck drop for that game. I already looked at the schedule. The Predators, who are the visiting team, they don't play for the next 2 or 3 days, so I don't think they care if the game gets moved later. But kind of I don't know, an oversight on the Canucks, part. I don't even know if they really have much of a say when it comes to making this schedule. But Farhan Lalji made the point that when Brian Burke was with the Canucks, they made sure to avoid the high school championship football games, never mind the Grey Cup in Vancouver. So, man, this is a weird situation. I don't know if we've seen NHL overlapping with the Grey Cup like that, in my memory anyway. No,
I hate to be a Debbie Downer, but to me, it screams of disrespect. Like, you would think that the league would you would think NHL would understand that there's a championship game that's going to have hopefully 50,000 people at, and maybe put that as a blackout date for Vancouver that day. But like you said, hopefully they do move it, and they have accommodated the Jets and the Bombers before, so hopefully that does happen. That's a lot of people using public transit in Vancouver, all in the same area, and I can only imagine it's going to be fun for us when we're there.
Yeah, it's going to be a blast in Vancouver. I think the city can handle it, and hey, if the Lions are in that game, I really think that would probably hurt the Canucks, at least on that one day. It would be really cool. Although, hey, they're a good team. They had a second round in the playoffs this year. We'll see what they do coming up. But who cares about hockey? It is July. Right. The Saskatchewan Roughriders hosting the Toronto Argonauts on Thursday Night Football. The Argos are now listed as 4.5 point favorites. The over-under set at 48.5. But the big news, Sheldon, is that Trevor Harris is going to be on the 6-game injured list. Got that sprained MCL. It is Shea Patterson time. He got some pretty valuable playing time in the preseason. And that's going to come into play here against the Argos as he gets his, first regular season start, right?
Yeah. I'm hopeful that he performs well. He's at least had like a full week of practice here. Well, even a little bit more, because I think he probably knew in the bye week that he was going to be going, right? So I think this is the best case scenario coming in off the bye. So he had a little bit more time maybe with the coach to get in the playbook, and hopefully they can, maybe shrink the playbook down a little bit for him. But he's also a different quarterback than Trevor Harris. He's more of a running quarterback, and so maybe they're going to throw in some more option plays, some quick slant screens, just to get him comfortable, hopefully, so that he can, get into the game, not, go 2 and out, just put a little bit of a rhythm in there. And I still think that the Riders are coached well. Their defense has played really good, actually. They're taking the ball away. They're stopping the run. They're giving up a good chunk of yardage, but not breaking it when it comes to the red zone. So that's a lot of. Toronto's a heavy favorite with that line, because you add like the 3 points for the home, right? So that, I don't know, I might make some money if you pick the Riders in this one.
That line doesn't really surprise me here. I don't think there's much confidence in the Rider offense anymore. They've had a tough time running the ball, but that's the fascinating.
Last week they did really well.
That's the fascinating matchup here. The Argos and the Riders both are the number 1 and 2 rush defenses in the CFL. The Riders are averaging 32.7 yards against a game, and the Argos are averaging 40 against a game. So I think that maybe it can be expected that both teams' strengths should be running the ball. I think we thought that Saskatchewan would run the ball very well right from the beginning of the season, and it seemed to be getting better every game. But now they're going to be tested against the Argos, and that is without a doubt the Argos' strength, running the ball. And now they're going to be tested against the Riders. So this This is interesting. Will Kadeem Carey get going? And hey, the storyline there too. AJ Ouellette playing his old team and Corey Mace coaching against his old team. Now, I mentioned both teams 1-2, success against the run. Both teams are 8-9 against the pass. So the Riders giving up 337 pass yards a game, while the Argos are giving up 346 pass yards a game. Are the quarterbacks going to be having enough time to get things going here? I think that is a big factor in this Thursday nighter.
Yeah, for sure. And it is interesting that both teams are so good against the run because they're boxing up the run, right? And so that is leaving them susceptible to getting those big pass yards again. So if that's the same way that Toronto's going to come in here thinking that they're going to be able to key in and stop AJ Ouellette, then maybe not having a lot of film on Shea and his passing, maybe that does leave them a little bit susceptible to some, quick slant routes over the top of the linebackers or, some screens to the wide receivers. I don't know, like you would think as a Rider fan, I would be feeling pretty down about our star quarterback being injured and all of that. But for some reason, I just think that this team is ready. I think that Coach Mace is doing a really good job with him, and I think that this defense is good enough to keep the Riders' offense in some of these games until Trevor can get healthy.
Montreal is another team that has a really good defense. Toronto did okay running the ball against them. They just didn't do it very much. Kadeem Carey had 9 carries, 61 yards when they played last week. 6.8 yards a carry. That's a pretty darn good average. But they weren't able to do it as much. Montreal got ahead pretty early and kind of took that away from the Argos. So the matchup up front here, I think, is an interesting one in the Thursday nighter. The Argos ended up claiming another defensive lineman, Deontay Knight, off of Hamilton's practice roster. I always love when this happens during the season, especially when it's rivals. And taking that Canadian D lineman off of their... Oh, sorry, no, it's the other way around. I'm mistaken. Hamilton took Deontay Knight off of Toronto's PR. So the Ticats are going to be adding that Canadian to their defensive line depth. But I love seeing that. when especially a Labor Day rival steals a player off of your practice roster.
Yeah, I love it too. That's why you got to be careful. You can't stash your good players on the practice roster because honestly, if you're a GM and you have an injury and you see somebody who performed, well in preseason or something, why not? Why not just take it from another team? You hurt another team and you make yourself better. I'm here for it.
Another change in the Argos defense. Quincy Mauger is going to be out with the leg injury. They've signed Robert Priester back on Monday, and he's going to be playing here against the Riders as the depth chart has already been released. But another blow to that Rough Rider offense is Sean Bain Jr. being ruled out at receiver for them. When he's been on the field, he's been a focus of that offense. So that is a big loss for the Riders. I do wonder who's going to be getting the targets in his absence. Will Kean Schaefer-Baker be making plays? Will Jarrett Stearns be making plays? Who do you see stepping up in the absence of Sean Bain Jr.?
Well, it looks like he's slotting in for him is Keyshawn Johnson, and he played pretty well in the preseason. And the interesting thing that I'll be looking for, because this kind of happened last year when Trevor Harris went down and Mason Fine and Jake went in there. Shea Patterson's going to probably be pretty familiar with Keyshawn Johnson because he's been running the second team offense, and Keyshawn would have been on there, right? So I'm looking to see if that's kind of where Shea goes first off, and I wouldn't be surprised if they attack that Toronto DB that's going to be playing right away, just like kind of Hamilton did when we had Marcus Sales first game, right? So it'll be interesting to see who he's matched up again, to see who might be able to exploit that.
You know, both quarterbacks are kind of in fill-in duty. Cameron Dukes, I don't know, maybe he could earn the starting job as the season goes on for the Argos, but I think both quarterbacks are pretty good with their legs as well. So that adds an extra wrinkle, but the early start of the season, at least I thought there has been a lot of good quarterback play around the league. Now Trevor Harris is out for an extended period, and Zach Collaros might be out as well. He's officially listed as questionable, as the Bombers are 2.5-point favorites over the visiting Ottawa REDBLACKS. Now, Ottawa coming off that win against Hamilton. I guess a bit of a short week, playing on Sunday, then on Friday, and traveling as well. Ottawa got the win against the Bombers in week 2. Now Drew Brown returning to his old digs. Can it get to 0-5 for the Bombers? Zach Collaros questionable. They're calling it a thorax injury, which is a pretty big area. Took that nasty hit against the Stampeders, but 0-5, that is a deep hole, especially when Saskatchewan and BC are racking up the wins in the West, right?
Yeah, I every game every week this year, I've thought that this is going to be the week that Winnipeg's going to come back and show us that they're still a good team. And every week it hasn't happened. And if, like, last week, Zach had like just over 50 yards passing in a half. Chris Drevla comes in, does decently, but he was overthrowing people on his deep routes and on his short routes. They weren't accurate. There was a lot of like pretty good catches, pretty good help from his receivers. So if Chris Drevler is starting and playing the whole game, the Winnipeg Blue Bombers are going 0-5. I'm just going to say that because Ottawa's defense, I think, is good enough to stop that. And even Strevler hasn't been very good with even just his sneaks and stuff this year. He's not getting the same, 5-6 yards that he was getting before he went down there. So I'm kind of baffled at how bad Winnipeg is. Like, I know they lost a couple people, and we've said that every week, but they still have like a good core. They still have the same coaches. They're just getting older, and I don't know, man. I think Owen's sticking around.
I think what shocks me the most is just they're not bringing the play to the other team. Like they don't have that physical presence that they've had
swagger
in they were just beating up teams before. Like there would be, and I know you're not supposed to do this anymore, but if Brady Oliveira ended up in a sort of a scrum, a pile, the O-line would get in there and push him another 8-9 yards down the field. They're not doing that anymore. And could it be really just losing? Not just. I mean, Jamarcus Hardrick is a long time offensive lineman, great opposite of Stanley Bryant. Like, did he bring that much energy to the offense and to the offensive line to make a difference like that? It's crazy. But then you look at the defense as well. They cannot get to the quarterback. And they can't just rely on Willie Jefferson to knock down every pass. He does it. He's good for a couple times a game. I know that. But they need to get to Drew Brown. It sounds so simple, but they've been unable to do that as well. So the trench battle, seeing Winnipeg lose that almost every game, that's been really shocking. Yeah,
and they just can't get anything going, and especially like even the home games, the crowd's they've been booing. They haven't been that loudest fan base in the CFL that they claim to be, which is understandable when you're losing every game. But Drew Brown's going to be pumped up to get in there. They just came off of a walk-off field goal win, and if they get another win here, and let's say the Argos lose, they're right in there for, second place. So Ottawa has everything to play for, and so does Winnipeg, but they just look like they're demoralized. They look like they don't know what's going on. The play calling is suspect. The clock management is suspect. And this is stuff that Winnipeg hasn't had issues with before. So I don't know how it's going to change, but it has to change for them. Like, this is a must-win game for them.
Yeah, I agree. They're also without Evan Holm, at least in practice. He hasn't practiced this week, and maybe an enforcement coming in the receiving core. Lucky Whitehead did not get re-signed by the BC Lions in the offseason. It looks like they're working things out to get him to Winnipeg going forward. I mean, I guess it is some good news that Kenny Lawler has shed the cast on his arm, and hopefully he can get back there sooner rather than later for that Winnipeg offense. But Lucky Whitehead has made plays in the CFL before with the Lions and the Bombers. It's a very inexperienced receiving core all of a sudden, other than Drew Wolodarski and Nick Dembski. So the storyline, Sheldon, is going to be former college roommates Drew Wolodarski and Chris Trevler trying to get things going for the Bomber offense. I don't know if I like either of them in my fantasy lineup, but if they can't get the running game going against Ottawa, it's not going to get going at all, the offense, I should say. Now, the last time I said that a game was going to be a low-scoring affair, that would be when the Alouettes crushed the REDBLACKS. So, Ottawa has proven that, hey, they can go out and win, and they get crushed the very next week. So they need to establish some consistency themselves in this one. And if they win this, I think Bob Dice and the REDBLACKS, or the Bank Street Bullies, are going to be riding pretty high. If they can go in and beat Winnipeg again, and I think beating that team 2 times in a row early in the season, like if the Bombers lose again, I probably won't be picking them for the remainder of the season. Like
I said last week I was at that point, and I'm there this week.
Man, I'm fascinated by how things are going, but you notice how things have gone so far this season. There's some big names receivers that haven't really gotten it going. Now, Tim White was one of them. He had a good game last week against Ottawa. Dominic Rhymes is another one for the REDBLACKS. But Justin Hardy has been doing a lot for that REDBLACKS offense. And I don't know. I expect Drew Brown to continue looking his way, and Dominic Rhymes is going to get those number 1 receivers. And we'll talk about Geno Lewis while he has been off this start of the season. Nobody gives credit, to the number 1 DBs, the boundary corners that are covering a guy like Geno, but it opens things up for Dylan Mitchell. So they are obviously still very valuable to their offenses, but Dom Rhymes, could this be the week when he finally gets things going against the Bombers? I don't know who's going to be working on him. Hey, Tyrell Ford had that great interception against Calgary last week, but it is kind of shocking to see the lack of production from him so far in 2024.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting because it seems like every team does have that kind of player who they have these slumps and then they have the big game, and there hasn't been many other than Tyson Philpott back-to-back like really, really good games, right? So yeah, if you're looking at fantasy this week, don't pick a player other than Tyson Philpott, who had a really good week last week, and maybe you'll have a chance. But I do expect Dominic Rhymes to get back into the swing of things. I think he's too good of a receiver to stay down. But he is attracting those doubles, and like you said, he's going up against the best cover guys. So they just have to be a little bit more just a little bit more creative with the play calling to get him involved there. Get him some short screen passes, get him some slants so he can use that elusive speed that he has.
Off the top of your head, do you know which running back in the CFL has the number 1 yards per carry average?
No.
It's Rock Armstead for the Ottawa REDBLACKS. I mean, you knew it was going to be somebody from this game, man.
Yeah, man.
Now, you look at those stats. Ottawa is third in rushing yards per game, 85 of them. Can they get it going against the Bombers? The Bombers are kind of middle of the pack. I mean, they're giving up 94.5 yards per game on the ground. You know who's getting the worst yards per rush and yards per game on the ground? That's the Saskatchewan Roughriders, the only team gaining less than 60 rush yards a game and the only team gaining less than 4 yards per rush. So there's rushing yard stats for you so far in 2024. But Drew Brown making a return to his old stadium, his old team. And the Bombers are 2.5-point favorites. So while the betting line makers didn't like Saskatchewan being without their starting quarterback, they don't seem to care so far about Winnipeg possibly being without Zach Collaros as well. The heaviest favorite this week, and I don't think it's too surprising, is the Montreal Alouettes, 9.5-point favorites over the Calgary Stampeders. The over-under is set at 50.5. Somehow, Jason Moss has found a way, even though that they're Grey Cup champions, to light a fire, to get that chip in their shoulder, and feel like, and give them the feeling that the Alouettes still have something to prove this year. And are they ever proving it? I know Cody Fajardo, a lot have said that, hey, this guy, it was a fluke season, all that kind of thing. He might be the best playing quarterback in the league right now. And that's without much of a rushing game. I was always a believer that an offense needed balance, but so far the Alouettes don't have it, and they're 4-0. So what do I know?
Yeah, Jason Moss doesn't need balance. Montreal's been playing lights out, and Calgary last week was not lights out. Jake Maier, from all the first few games of the season, we thought, at least I thought, he maybe shook off some of the bad habits and the bad throws from last year, but it looked like a game from the middle of last season. He was overthrowing, underthrowing. It didn't seem like he was under that much pressure, but he just for some reason couldn't get it going, and he's gonna have a huge bounce back game against Montreal here, and I just don't see how that's going to happen.
Montreal leads in offensive touchdowns. They lead in offensive points per game, but they also, on the other hand, lead in points against. They've averaged 18.3 points against, and that is unreal. Obviously, they're not, well, at least I don't think so, going to be keeping up that pace so far, but this is anecdotal. I always felt that even when the Stampeders were winning 12, 13 games a season, they'd always go to Montreal and struggle. And I don't know if it's the St. Catherine's Street effect or whatever in Montreal, but the Stamps would go there even when they were good and have a tough time. So I feel like maybe they will have a tough time this week playing the reigning Grey Cup champs. And they've got all this momentum, and now the crowd in Montreal, they've got that momentum. They're eating it up. Saturday night at Percival Molson, that looks like a great time and the place to be in Montreal. And man, I want to get down there and crush poutine out of a football helmet as soon as possible, man.
Yeah, and if they keep winning these games, they're going to have air horn night pretty soon, I think. You want to talk about controversies? Now, a few years ago, it was Slurpee cups. Now it's the onside punt with the Alouettes. I love it.
I love coming back and seeing that listeners are threatening not to listen again because of a Twitter poll that you made, Sheldon. But Montreal is the center of a lot of controversies. The air horn guy and the onside punt. They know how to make friends across the league.
Well, they do, but the main thing is they're winning. So
Yeah,
good on
that's
them.
true.
Like Cody he seems to be dialed in. Tyson Philpott is playing amazing. Uh, they have a running back, but they don't need him. Like defense is playing lights. Like man, they're the cream of the crop, and they've risen to the top.
Look at that Macho Man Randy Savage reference.
Oh yeah.
Now, they did suffer an injury at Reggie Stubblefield a few weeks ago. The linebacker's out for the season, but now linebacker Wesley Sutton has been poking around the practice field as well. He's eligible to return after the bye week, which is in a couple weeks, because next week Montreal's going to be playing Toronto again, I believe. So it'll be fun to see what those teams do in the return match, spread out by a couple weeks. But I think on our YouTube channel was asked if we think Montreal has the depth to repeat as Grey Cup champions. And in one word, yes. I know there's a lot left to be played, but right now, you called him the cream of the crop, and I'd say that's a pretty good way to... Let's see if I can look it up in French quickly. Cream of the crop en français. And I'm going to absolutely butcher the... it's creme de la creme. That's easy.
Creme de la creme. There you go.
There's the name of the pod.
They might be losing a player though in the next couple of weeks, depending on how an arbitration goes. So that's the one thing that maybe the fans might have to worry about. But who knows when the arbitrator is going to actually weigh in.
Hey, there you go. Yet another controversy with the Montreal Alouettes. Now, Shawn Lemon, he always seems to get... Remember last year, he was fired up to play his old team, and I think he ended up... did he have a fumble return for a touchdown or something like that? He had a good game against the Stampeders that thought maybe he was done,
Yeah, but pretty much every team is his former team.
That's true.
He's working on that Kevin Glenn record. But
so I guess he's found a way to have a good-sized chip on his shoulder because he's got history with every team, almost, in the CFL. As far as the Stampeders go, they've got a pretty serious... it's not a serious injury, but not a good loss for your secondary. Demario Houston hasn't practiced all week, dealing with an ankle injury. He had a critical interception against the Bombers last week. So he playing his old team and got an interception there. So if Demario Houston's not going to be playing, I expect the Alouettes, and they've shown it before, Jason Moss and Cody Fajardo will test that position. If they've got somebody filling in there, they're going to be throwing that direction, and we'll see how rusty the fill-in or inexperienced will be for Demario Houston, a big member of that Calgary Stampeders secondary. And we'll be watching the status of Cam Eccles, the receiver that's had a pretty good start to the year for the Stamps. He was limited on Tuesday in practice with a calf injury, practice in full on Wednesday. But the Stampeder offense, they've got their work cut out for them against Montreal. I'm not even really sure what their weakness is, to be honest. The Alouettes are giving up the least yards per game. Least points, like just every stat. They're giving up the least yards per play, least offensive touchdowns. Like Dedrick Mills, he's gonna be in a car accident on every single play. I think he likes that though. The Calgary Stampeders running back. There might be some high-speed collisions in this game Saturday in Montreal. The final game of the week has the BC Lions at 5.5-point favorites over the Hamilton Tiger Cats at Tim Hortons Field, where the over-under is set at 53.5. We'll start with some good injury news out of Vancouver, Keon Hatcher and TJ Lee, some veterans with that BC Lions team. TJ Lee on the defense, Keon Hatcher could be argued is a leader in that receiving room. I know Alexander Hollins has been lighting it up so far this year, but you bring Hatcher in and that offense just gets that much more dangerous. They both had Achilles injuries in the Western Final last year, and they're both practicing in full this week. I don't know if that means that they're going to be returning against Hamilton, but either way, those are some nice additions to a team that the Lions could be seeing back on their side, at least within the next few weeks, man.
Yeah, it's crazy when the BC's already playing well, and then you have these two guys on the bench that once they come back in, that can only make them better, right? So glad to see. You never want to see somebody go down with an Achilles, and just goes to show like just how bad that injury is, because we're already 3 weeks into the season and they're just able to start practicing. So hopefully they are good to go. I don't know if they'll throw them in right away, maybe give them another week here, but especially when you're going against an 0-4 team in Hamilton, like I don't think there's any real reason to put them in, but again, great to see them back at full speed in practice.
Now, the Ticats making a change at special teams coordinator after the game last week against the REDBLACKS, where Devontae Dedmon was having some success in the return game. And they end up firing Paul Boudreau, and they bring in Dennis McKnight as their special teams coordinator. That didn't take long after the loss to Ottawa on Sunday. Now, it'll be an interesting matchup, at least I think. Now, everybody wants to talk about the struggles of Geno Lewis, but I think we need to look at the full story and see who he's going against. And maybe McLeod Bethel-Thompson, for example, last week wanted to avoid throwing to a guy like Gary Peters. And you know what? That play, that 2-point conversion that they finally went to Geno, and that's a catch that he makes a lot of the time, but credit to Gary Peters for breaking that play up. That was just a battle. Mano a mano, Geno versus Peters, and Peters won that matchup. Is he going to be on Tim White in this game? It'll be interesting to see who he is going to be covered. I think he has become one of the top cover men in the Canadian Football League. So he's going to be working on one of those premier Ticat receivers. Maybe it is Tim White, who had his breakout game last week. We got to talk about Shamar Bridges, though. Just under 20 fantasy points a game. He's still $4,500 on the CFL fantasy game. If Tim White's going to be occupied, I don't know. Does the good run continue for Shamar Bridges? It kind of seems like it could.
Yeah, I mentioned before that Philpott was the only one, but you're right. Shamar Bridges has been having a great season so far. That's just the byproduct of Tim White getting all the looks there. So, but as that progresses and you see that Tim White did get back into things, maybe that is because the other team did start to key in on Shamar Bridges a little bit. But that's a great scenario if you're Bo Levi Mitchell, because then you have one of the two guys who, you trust and can catch. Because obviously, I think last week built up a lot of trust between Bo and Tim White again. Once that happened and you got the breakout there. So hopefully for Hamilton fans' sake, Bo's in sync with both of them now and can do some damage.
Greg Bell got into the game at running back for the Ticats last week. He had an all right game, but we're going to be watching James Butler, who had a nice game in week 1, has kind of struggled since, before missing last week with the concussion. I think that did happen in that second game against Saskatchewan, that defensive line stop near the I think it was third down, and it was a crunching hit. James Butler, they've got him listed as limited in practice as of Wednesday. They really need to have that running game going with Butler, get him more touches. That'll be a way, to be able to beat the BC Lions. I really think the Ticats have a chance here, just because, I mean, they're making some silly mistakes. They're taking stupid penalties. Sometimes their defense is leaving a little bit to be desired. But I don't think BC has looked as dominant as really I thought they would so far. And it's just the home game. I feel like just Bo's going to get him there eventually. So I'm really interested to watch this game on Sunday night. Seems where the Ticats have been living the past few weeks. Maybe getting into that routine a little bit is going to help them out against the BC Lions. And hopefully they can have Lawrence Woods III good to take returns, because Tim White was doing it last game against the REDBLACKS, and there's also some other enforcements, it looks like, coming in to return from injury. Joel Figueroa dealing with the shoulder injury, he was limited on Wednesday, the offensive lineman, and Dwayne Hendricks dealing with a hamstring injury, limited on Wednesday as well. But this game is going to be a fun one to watch, I think. And will the Lions get William Stanback going? They've been able to avoid sacks with Vernon Adams Jr., but still waiting for that Stanback breakout. I know he had a touchdown last week against Edmonton. Can he do the same against the Ticats? That'll be another player I'll be watching for those BC Lions.
Yeah, hopefully. He's such a dynamic running back that I want to see him. He's one of those guys that you love seeing break to the second level and just, bull over a linebacker who tries to stop. I loved it. In the limited time that he got in Montreal, he still was able to show how great he was. So hopefully, but BC's had they've had trouble with the running game for a while now, actually. Like, Butler was there before he left. He went to Hamilton. That's when he kind of broke out in Hamilton. So hopefully for Vernon Adams' sake, they can get a running game going so he doesn't have to run around as much, and he can keep his legs fresh as the season goes on.
Now, I didn't forget about our bobblehead giveaway, the John Gott bobblehead. I'm going to push that to the next week's show, though. Not next week, just a few days. The Sunday show, I will put all the commenters into a hat. We'll draw out of a hat or a digital hat or whatever it was. And we'll pick a winner there to get your John Gott beer-chugging bobblehead. So if you do want to enter, just comment on our Week 4 preview show on YouTube. There's like 50 some comments, something like that. It's kind of funny. A lot of people do want the bobblehead. And then talking about the schedule, pretty 50-50. Some like the Thursday games and the 4 days a week, saying it's, I got things to do. And others say, I love having it on 4 days a week. So again, the schedule, trying to get everybody to agree on that, I think is never going to happen, man. And if I've learned anything this season, that might be one of the things I've learned.
Yep, I completely agree with that.
Now, I want to read an email we got to the show. George Hyde has interacted with the show in the past. toandout.ca uses the mailbag feature. Now, he started his own CFL podcast called the CFL Outsider on YouTube. I love that. So good for George. Now, he last year sent some thoughts he's had of some teams in different points of the season. So he sent a sentence on each team at the quarter mark of the 2024 CFL season. He says for BC, we're still seeing good VA and bad VA. The difference is this year, good VA is still lights out and bad VA is throwing incompletions rather than interceptions. For Edmonton, he says, hey, this is the best 0-4 team in decades. For Calgary, he says Dave Dickinson is the best coach in the league and doing more with much, much less. I think that's pretty good. In Saskatchewan, he says meteorologists are struggling to predict the effect of an entire province holding its breath on national weather systems. In Winnipeg, the vultures of karma have come home to roost. Whoa. George says in Hamilton, okay, they got Tim White going. Now what? In Toronto, with all due respect to the Argos quarterbacks of the last 2 and a bit years, I think Coach Dinwiddie could play a bonobo behind center and still have a winning record. Montreal, one word. Wow. Ottawa, they can be a scrappy bunch of Bank Street bullies. Gotta give them that. I think that's a good way to, wrap up the first quarter of the season. And he also says, in a more personal note, I want to thank you for the inspiration your show gave me. Retirement left me with nothing that I gave a damn about to do, and the sitting around killing time was killing me. After one of your podcasts, I thought, hey, Travis and Sheldon, and of course Ty back in the day, make that sound easy. Maybe I should do a show. So I did, and found out that it ain't easy at all. The pros from Dover just make it seem that way. George, also known as the old man shouting at clouds, we appreciate you sending that email, and hey, best of luck going forward with your show as well. We will talk about our fantasy lineups here. I've got Cody Fajardo as my quarterback, Rock Armstead and Kadeem Carey as my running backs. Really, for running back, I just want to find somebody that's going to get a lot of carries. I do have faith that both of those guys will continue to get a lot of carries. I have Tyson Philpott, Justin Hardy, and Shamar Bridges as my WR 1, 2, and flex. I have the Montreal Alouette defense. I've got $4,800 left over. That is staring a hole in my brain, so I'll probably mess with my lineup a lot going forward. What's yours looking like, man?
Well, I'm doing terrible at fantasy. I had one good week, so take that for what it's worth. I don't find value in defenses at all, so I went with Hamilton because it was only 5,400. So, hopefully they get me a couple points. Quarterback Cody Fajardo, I think he's playing amazing, so we'll see if that happens. I'm still rocking AJ Ouellette because I think they're going to be running the ball a lot, and he came off a good game, and I think that is good for him. And I have Walter Fletcher. Receivers, I got Tyson Philpott, I got Hollins, and my flex is Cole Speaker. So obviously I'm hoping that Montreal has a pretty good game against Calgary.
Oh, and Cody's my captain, by the way.
Okay, yeah, same. And then I also have $0 left over.
The goose egg. I love it.
Yeah.
Now, are you tempted at all to take Strevler? $7,000 bucks.
No.
He had a hat trick of rushing touchdowns a couple weeks ago.
Yeah, but I don't trust them getting to the 1 yard line for him 3 times in the game right now.
Yeah, I guess there's that. You got to get all the way there, 109
he's
yards.
He's gonna lose you points on interceptions.
I think you've already foreshadowed your picks, but I'm picking Toronto to beat Saskatchewan. Toronto is actually listed here as the favorite, slight favorite, 4.5 points. I'm picking the Bombers to beat the REDBLACKS. The Bombers are 2.5 point favorites. I'm picking the Alouettes to beat the Stampeders. The Owls are 9.5 point favorites in that one. And I'm picking the Ticats to get their first win of the season over the BC Lions. The Lions, the visiting Lions, are 5.5 point favorites at Tim Hortons Field. Those are my week 5 predictions. Where are you rolling, Mr. Sheldon Jones?
I am rolling Saskatchewan, Ottawa, Montreal, and BC.
All right.
So we're pretty different again this week.
You could be 4-0.
I think last week, the last
2-0.
time we were a little bit different, it worked out pretty good for me.
I was 3-1 when we were
you?
pretty different, so I'm okay with that.
Was I 3-1 too? Who knows? Whatever.
You can go to twoandout.ca. You can find our merch shop. You can write to us with the mailbag. You can subscribe to the show on your favorite podcatcher and on YouTube as well. Next week, I'll be ready to recognize Mr. 400 and Mr. 420. We're now at 422 subscribers on YouTube, so thank you so much for helping the show grow there. I'm Travis Currah. He's Sheldon Jones. We'll talk to you after week 5 of the CFL season.
Thanks for listening. Find more great shows like this at CF Pod Network on Twitter.